Start the room. There we go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Living Ascension. Yes, thank you for almost reminding me to record because I almost forgot. So it was a couple of weeks. And what did we talk about 2 weeks ago? Because I know it's sort of related and I wanted to connect.
Yeah, I did make a note of all this. It ties into so many things, like we did following the rules 1 week, then staying in alignment, and then in addition to that, manipulation.
Oh, right.
So all of those seem to
and what sparked us were a series of conversations, things we saw, some posts in Facebook, right?
Which I did pull up that post because I was like, that's just what lit the fire under me. Or actually, a better word is like, oh.
Well, yeah, that's just it says it all.
Because it caught me, because I thought, I've looked at that. And I know that. I know what that is.
But if it triggers,
even though, let me just read the first 2 lines of the post. It says, you attract into your life a reflection of what you think. Okay, I get that. But this is the one that got me. But you also attract into your life what you judge. I mean, that was just like, bam, right, gut punch, like, oh. Okay. So it made a lot of things make sense.
Right. Well, and what was even more interesting was the reaction. And neither one of us posted this. It was somebody else that we're both connected with, right? And so then the reaction of other people reading it was like, that's like there was this whole like, right, about, well, no, because that's wrong. And that's, what did they call it? It's spiritual.
It wasn't bullying, but it was like spiritual. Was it brutality or spiritual?
Something like that. Spiritual bullying. It wasn't spiritual bullying, but it was something along those lines of basically that is, well, you said you have it up, right? So look under the comments.
I had the picture of the original post. I can go find the original post.
So the thing is, well, that'll take a bit. So it was morning, Yasmin. So it was, spiritual. It's something like spiritual bullying. We'll just go with that. It wasn't the term, and it was because the term was like so perfect to talk about, but I can't remember what it was. Anyhow, and they were going on about like, how can you say that, people who get cancer, like
get sexually abused,
or children and all this kind of stuff, right? And so this is what spiritual abuse. That's what it was. That was the term, spiritual abuse. And it was going on about all of this stuff about like how, like it's whitewashing and all this kind of stuff about that, like there are some things that we're victim to, right? And it was funny because in the same week I was talking to a client who, was talking about another practice that, she follows as well. And this person who runs this practice used to say that there were no victims, right? Until then they got sick. They had like some kind of really debilitating sickness. And then they did heal themselves, right? But they were like, but now their whole shtick is, oh, but we do have victimhood, like as children and this and that and da da da. And so we have to heal that. And I was having a conversation with this client, and I said, I understand that perception. I said, if we believe we're victims, we are.
Right.
Absolutely.
And, when I was making my notes for this and I came up with the only thing that we are a victim to is ourselves and our beliefs.
Right.
Period.
Right. And that was at the same time I was going through a period of being really angry about a lot of things with other people. And I mean, the thing, and this is what's really interesting. When you get more conscious, like part of the practice is you take responsibility for all of it. Like that's creationism. I am the creator of my reality. There's no like, only when it's convenient.
or only when it's something that puts me in a position of power or authority or expertise, or something that I deem, that I judge as positive.
Right. And so like we talk about that, and then we don't want to, like, and so many are just, and it literally, they were slamming that statement. And I was just like, you were the one who saw it first. And then you're like, well, did you see this? And I was like, no. And I went and read it, and I was like, and then I had to sit on it and then like ask guidance. Is there something for me to say there? And I did end up writing something about, absolutely. We do. I absolutely agree with that statement. 100%. I 100% agree with, we attract in what we judge, what we fear, right? Like, and that's a judgment, right? As fear is distasteful and all this kind of stuff. The biggest, and I just did a series of videos on this, and I just did my little workshop on it last week, which was one of the videos I talked about, one of the three key messages hidden in plain sight are triggers. And judgments are triggers. Victimhood is a trigger, right? And so instead of getting lost in, oh my God, I'm such a victim, or that person's such a victim, oh, that poor person, because we talk about compassion, having compassion or pity or whatever, all ego. That's all ego. That's all saying that person is not powerful enough to create their own reality. So therefore they're at the mercy of others' realities, versus, no, this is an infinite soul that chose their journey. And you know what? Even more kudos and love and support, because they're choosing this path of such challenge.
Right. I mean, and it even goes to victim of, like we talked about a few weeks ago, of the rules, whether it's the rules of science, the rules of nature, the rules of economy, the rules of supply and demand, the rules of religion. I mean, it all falls into that same victimhood. And, even if you don't want to call it victimhood, if you want to call it just subject to.
Well, and think about it. Like, so what do we do in spirituality? Like it's across the board of so many different practices of, oh, well, I'm just a victim to, and we don't say I'm a victim to, but we'll be like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. Oh, it's a full moon. Oh, it's a solar flare. Oh, it's some activation, energetic opening, and I can't help it. And yes, we can. We chose it. And so that's the difference. And it's not, it's funny because we think of judging as just negative. Judging is positive too, right? So
absolutely.
Like, we think that's great. So that's a judgment of, we think that's great, versus what would not, if that didn't happen, it wouldn't be great. Right. So that's the duality of that whole thing. But the hardest thing that many people have to do with, personal things that they have claimed victimhood to in their life. And, I talk about this, oh my gosh, this is a big topic in the Trinity practice. We talk about there is no victimhood, that we are the creators, and everything in our reality is something we have chosen at some level of consciousness. And the thing is to do it without, when we look at something without judgment and say, how did it fit in my journey? How does it help? How did it help to propel me? How did it help to shape who I wanted to be as an identity? And you stop looking at it as a victimhood thing, then here's the thing. If we are to become empowered, it is for us to let go of all victimhood.
Right. Well, I have searched and looked for ways to express, when you come into that self-responsibility and say, I created this, to I created this.
Right.
Because it's the same energy.
Right.
The energy of creation. It's the judgment that makes it like, oh, I created this, versus I created this. And when you slump into the, oh, I created this, that's where the victimhood comes in and says, so I have to then follow this set of rules.
Right.
Versus, oh, I'm so powerful, I created this, so why can I not take that same energy and create this?
Right. Right. And part of what one person was arguing in that particular post had to do with, well, like, I have chronic illness that's, genetic and hereditary and da, da, da. My response to that was like, not specifically to that person, but it's like, yes, we have familial soul agreements that we're going to learn certain lessons through this particular experience. And it can be abuse. It can be chronic illness. It can be a whole bunch of different things. And so it's to start looking at these things without judgment, because here's the thing. And it's like, well, I've changed those things for myself. There are many things that are considered genetic in my family that I have chosen not to have. And I don't, or I did, and I got rid of them as I've done this work. I have done it. It's not like I'm just talking it. I've done it myself.
Right.
And so you can change it. The thing is, for you to change something is for you to take your power and say, I created it to begin with. Because when we say something else created it, we say, we believe we can't change it.
Exactly. And that's the, I don't know. A lot of people refer to it as the bitter pill or the mean pill or whatever. But to me, it's the pill of life, that I came here and I have created this.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I acknowledge that I had the power to create this, just like I had the power to create the equal and opposite of it, or the most positive thing. And I find it fascinating that I don't know if it's the times or the energies or where we are in our expansion process, but we find it so much easier to embrace the judgment of the negative versus, well, if I created it at this magnitude this way,
right,
I can create it that same magnitude this way.
Right.
Just like your bank account. It's the difference between a line going one line versus two lines, a negative to a plus. It's the same thing. It's the same energy, just applied differently.
Yeah. And so, and so it's the thing, when we shift that perspective, right? So that's how I have shifted my own over the years, right? So when it's something, like I was angry about something a couple of weeks ago, and it was like being shown to me through other people that I know. And I was just like, I was angry at myself, right? I was angry at myself because I knew I had created those situations, or I had brought those reflections to myself. And then I chose to step away and be like, yeah, I don't need to have that reflection anymore. I need to see why I wanted to have it. And
what was the value?
And what was the value of having those individuals in my life, because that was what they were reflecting to me. And so it's like, well, I really don't want that anymore. I'm ready for something else. I'm ready to change that. And the thing is, for me to get to the bottom of why it was I wanted that to begin with, right? And that is so the trigger is the trigger when we feel like, and those are our biggest triggers, when we feel victim to something, right?
Yes.
Is when
where we believe we had no choice, when actually we just ignored our choice.
Right. Well, or we ignored the message that we're given to ourselves until we had to make it big enough to make it a victim looking kind of thing, right? We talk about in energy work, everything in the physical comes from the non-physical, everything.
Absolutely.
The quantum field, right, is basically our entire universe is made up of energy that's all interrelated, and nothing is separate. And energy never goes away. It just changes form. So the thing is finding the interrelation and what the purpose is of this piece within the whole field of the energy. There's nothing that's out of our control, because we're all part of the entirety of the whole thing. So if you want to look at it from a very scientific kind of standpoint, that's what it is, versus saying, okay, yeah, we're all one, we're all part of the God consciousness. It's exactly the same as the physics of the energy of the universe, right? So we create from that field. We create from the possibilities. We create so all equally, We're all part of it. We're all created of it. We all die from it, die out of it, die back into it, right? Or we are in it, and we just recognize that we have always been a part of it.
Right.
And so, when we get sick, it's because we have been giving ourselves messages that we have been ignoring for whatever, right? Cancer, like to even just acknowledge that, or chronic illness or whatever, has to do with some long-term, because cancer is actually in the energy world considered a chronic illness because it takes a long time to build up in your body.
To get to that place, right?
Get to that place. Even when it's a fast growing one, it's like it was there and building before it exploded into what it did, right?
Right. The energy of it was there before it became into the physical.
Right. And a lot of times it's that exponential curve of like, it starts out like, unnoticeable, and it just keeps on going. And then finally it just explodes, right? It's a cumulative thing. If we live our lives in denial and victimhood, guess what? We're denying ourselves, and then we have toxic frustration and anger and whatever. And we believe that we are powerless, and we believe that then we have self-hatred, self-loathing, self-resistance, all this kind of stuff.
Out.
And so we create chronic illness through that.
Right.
And so if we have a genetic chronic illness, one that we consider genetic, it's a familial soul agreement to learn lessons through the limitation of that chronic illness.
Right. Well, and there's, the new field of epigenetics, which says that, okay, yes, this is what your genes express. However, your body may react differently to that set of genes, which
Right.
means that you're not just a victim to your genes.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that even
much-
today, what?
Which many like to claim, right?
Right. Even today, that's misunderstood. That's like, oh, well, I have this defect, so that means X, Y, and Z. No,
Right.
that doesn't. Only if you choose for that.
Right.
Only if you choose to express that.
Right. Right. So the key is, and what I have said is I have been doing this for whatever, 11 and a half years professionally. And I can't tell you the number of clients that I have sat with who've been sexually abused, who've had chronic illness, who've had cancer, even lethal doses of cancer. Right.
Right.
That when I sat with them and said, and I say it with no judgment, only with the effort of uncovering to accomplish whatever it is they want to accomplish in sessions, right? If we transcend judgment of that situation, whatever that blanket, if we transcend judgment and look at it without that, how did it serve you? Do you know how it served you on your path, right? I cannot honestly, I cannot remember any client that said, no, I can't see how it served me. Pretty much everybody, when we could look at it in the safety of no judgment, in the safety of the bigger picture, and just looking at it like a movie and saying, well, what would the purpose be in this?
And that even goes for, there are so many paths up, there are as many paths up the mountain as there are people. And if your path up the mountain includes succumbing to the energy of that, that's perfect as well. There's no judgment to that either.
Right.
And I mean, that to me is the epitome of the losing the judgment. That, we come back to the book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, so many times.
I was just going to bring that one up.
About the lifestyle that he lived was absolutely perfect, even though it was judged.
Oh, highly judged. And he was
highly judged,
exiled from his family, and basically out on the street.
And oh, what a shame, what a waste.
Mm-hmm.
It was perfect. It was absolutely,
it was what he chose. And that's what he said to her was, no, it was my choice, because I knew this was it. This was what I wanted.
And it was absolutely perfect, which everything always is.
Right.
And, when we're looking at it in terms of this conversation, it's not even a question of necessarily, you're not successful in this unless you can change it to look more like this. That's judgment. It's coming to the place where I embrace this without judgment, whether I choose to change it or not.
Well, and be present with it to say, how is it serving me? Show me how you're serving me.
Right.
So then I can choose to change it if I feel like I'm done with the way that it's serving me.
It's that opening that conversation with
Yes.
yourself to say, okay, why have I created this? And then, is this for me? Do I continue with this, or do I then take my energy in a different direction?
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, that is so empowering. And so that's the freedom.
It is. It is, but it's so scary to so many because it uncovers some deep cracks and crevices of self-loathing and self-judgment. Right.
Well, and we want to abdicate that responsibility because we came here to forget that, to believe that we aren't the divine.
Right. And then, and there are many times I've been in sessions with clients and stuff, and just in conversation with people who, part of what I do really well is just sort of see the bigger picture, and I see it without judgment, but I can say it without judgment and impart it without judgment. But if the person judges it within themselves, it could really trigger them when I say something. But, like I worked with someone who had Alzheimer's, and his wife was very distraught about the whole thing. Right. And I had said, all she said, well, can he change it? Can he change it? Can he change it? I'm like, of course he could change it. The thing is whether he'll choose to change it or not. And the key is for him to just come to peace with the reason he created it, for where he is, for his journey and everything else. So I did all this work with this individual, and I saw that it wasn't going to change. I saw that it was that, like this was an individual who for lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes sacrificed himself to take care of others. And this was his way of having the experience of having others take care of him, putting himself in a space of forcing himself to be taken care of by others. Right. And it made him so angry and frustrated and everything else. And so it was all the work that I did working with him was coming to a place of peace with it, to allow. Right. And I had seen that had he let go of that, he would fall right back into the same pattern as would everybody around him, because that's what they always expected of him. And that's why they were so distraught that he had that happen, which to say to a spouse is very offensive, right? Because like, well, what do you mean? So you're saying that it's just selfish of me. And it's like, well, that's what the motivation is though, right? That's why you're sitting here going, well, and the person would say, like, oh, well, he always took care of me and now I have to take care of him and I'm so tired and And it's like, do you hear what you're saying? Right. And I'm not judging you because that's what you're feeling. That's just how you're feeling. But that's part of why he won't change it, because he knows that if he changes it, it's going to just go back to the same pattern and whatever. And his experience is to have a different experience. Right.
Just, when I work with people, especially lately, the anxiety, and they have the tools to change the anxiety, but yet they choose the anxiety because it's something they're familiar with, something they're comfortable with. And to admit that is because they judge it so severely that they would be judging themselves to admit, I'm choosing this because I'm actually more comfortable with this than the unknown.
Yeah. I have that going on with one of my adult children right now. And I literally, who is just only happy when they're anxious, when she's anxious about something.
Because it's familiar and it gives them, they have positive experience because it's been a constant companion, and they work with it and decide when they're going to let go, when they're not going to let go. So it's that ever-present friend.
Always there. And and if it's not one thing, it's another. I thought I turned off my sound. But I literally said to her last night, I said, do you know that you can actually just choose not to waste a ton of energy on being anxious? And the response I got was, it's not that easy. And I was like,
oh yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I didn't say anything. And literally it was I'm like, okay, well, okay, that's your choice,
Right.
and that's fine. But I just want to remind you that you can choose to not be this way about it. And yes, when you're going through, I know, because I've had it. I've had anxiety.
And I think every human has.
Yes. And I know, and I had it when I was younger, when I was my daughter's age. I had a lot of it, and it consumed me. And I know she's got the same kind of tendencies. And I'm telling her you can change it because I have, right? But
Right.
she's
Right.
lost in it, and it's okay, because I think a lot of their generation is anyway. But and we get lost in that, and we say then we're victim to it, right? And so, and you say things like this, right? Well, do you meditate? Do you take some time for presence? And I'm not talking about some big, monstrous meditation on a mountain, for 5 hours or whatever. It's, do you take time for presence every day? Do you take a breath? Do you step away when you're having anxiety and just take some breaths and clear your mind? Do you, and it's always like, oh, no. And like, and they say this like it's a pain to even suggest it. And you're like, but you'll put how many hours a day into the stress that you're like allowing.
Well, and avoiding it.
Yes.
Yeah. No. But I think coming to that place of acknowledging that it's actually a comfort when you've judged yourself so severely for having it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big first step for a lot of people. If they can get to that place of saying, yeah, anxiety is my best friend. It's always here for me. Never let me down.
Right.
That's a huge statement.
Right. And to say it without judgment, to basically be like,
Absolutely.
yeah, I see it there. I see it what it's there for. And we have that. We have this, that you want to call a pandemic. A pandemic is a pandemic. I mean, this is a pandemic of victimhood. That's what we have.
Right.
Like, I'm too anxious. I can't do this. I'm too scared. I'm too or I have these. I mean, I cannot. It's incredible being 53, feeling like I'm at the prime of my life, and seeing so many in their 50s and 60s around me who are like, they're shocked to find out that I have not one prescription medication.
Right.
Right. I use, or they're like, you go to a doctor's office and they're like, well, what prescriptions are you on? Nothing. I take supplements.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, what pharmacy do you use? I don't have a pharmacy because I have no prescription, like that kind of stuff. And because, and I'm not saying that with judgment, I'm saying it because we can change it. We can create that, but we've gotten lost in this tsunami of what we're victim to. Like, and it's almost like the big lesson is coming through it to say, I see it and I see how it served me. And now I'm going to change it and do it differently.
Right. Right. Well,
or I'm going to use it to the best of its ability.
Another piece of empowerment within that whole scenario is we each choose our way of working through that. You chose supplements, someone else chooses prescriptions. They're both chemical compounds that you ingest.
Right.
And it's like some people choose shoplifting to deal with their anxieties. Some people choose, street drugs versus prescription drugs. Some people choose alcohol. Some people choose overeating, overspending. Everyone comes to their own way of coping with it versus, let me just look at this and embrace whatever behavior, so that then I can filter it again. That famous thing, through your guidance.
Right.
Is this for me?
Right. And I mean, food is a big one.
Right. Whether it's overeating or undereating.
Or using it as comfort is like one of the biggest things. Whether you are technically overeating or not, it's like seeing things, like when I went through all of that last year and letting go of a lot of things, it was coming to this realization of, oh, how much when I got uncomfortable with something, it was like, you didn't realize that I was just mindlessly snacking on something, right? Even if it's healthy, healthy, it was still less mindless.
Right.
And it's like,
well, and we judge so much about, I can't have gluten. I don't do dairy. And it's like, there's so many different ways to look at that is I choose to not have dairy, or I choose to not have gluten versus, oh, I can't have it. I mean,
Right.
listen to the verbiage there of the empowerment you're giving yourself to say, no, it was actually a choice. And I realized that I can choose differently tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And you can say, and people can poo-poo this all day long, but I have myself done it. I have seen others that I've worked with or known do it as well. Change allergies, change, sensitivities and all that kind of stuff. And it is a matter of deciding you can change it and realizing it's up to me. It's only up to me. No doctor can change it. No prescription can change it. No supplement can change it. It's all up to me.
Well, and we're getting to the place where, traditional medicine, Western medicine, is trying to catch up to things not working. And that's why they're stacking, antidepressants. You can't just have one now. You need 2 or 3 because they work better together. And it's because they stop working, because the body's like, no, you haven't heard the message.
Right.
So I've got to say it louder.
Yep.
Right. And that's why there's more syndromes and diseases, and because everything deserves a label so that then it can attract more to it. And it just stops working because it all comes back down to you.
Right.
And how you empower yourself.
I did get that message very strongly for a number of years a while back, probably maybe a decade ago, that at some point all the drugs were just going to stop working, that all the band-aids were going to stop working for everyone, because we've just gotten so lost in it. It's time to really wake up around it. And we just keep on putting ourselves further, like giving ourselves a sleeping pill to stay asleep a little longer kind of thing. And, oh, but I like this a little more, I like this a little longer. So we all do it, and we all do it. And there's no judgment on all of this. This is just perception of like seeing things differently. And it's coming to this place because truly the blessing of all of that is when we know we've created all of this, we know we can change it.
Right. And I think that that's the piece that I'm so passionate about that gets missed, is when you protect people from acknowledging that they've created it, you're essentially holding them where they are.
Yes.
By saying, yes, I created that. I am so amazing. I could create this, which means that since I am so amazing, I can create anything.
Right.
And that's where the penny drops, or that's where the aha moment is, where it's like, oh, you go from being the victim to the empowered. And by staying in that victimhood, you're missing that opportunity.
Right.
And so that may be what your guidance is for the moment.
Right. Exactly. And it might serve you the best in that moment, right? Does it serve me right now?
Right.
And when you start seeing it, it's the key is getting out of judgment. Okay. So that is a whole exercise and a whole focus of forgiveness, right? So we have our whole, we got to our shameless self blog. We do have an entire course on just forgiveness, which is really a course on acceptance, right? Because when we have judgment on something, that means we have something that is unforgiven, right? So it's either something we blame ourselves for, right? We blame others for when we judge it, when we think that there's something that triggers us. When we play victimhood, all of that falls under the lack of forgiveness or lack of acceptance, because we judge it in some way that causes us to expel it from ourselves and try to keep it external, right?
Right.
Or deny it, right? And that's where we create victimhood. There's nothing wrong with saying, it's interesting, even in the class that I did last week, the 1 hour class that I did, one of the biggest things that prevents us from seeing the message is the judgment we have around something. So if we have judgment on what we see, on how it makes us feel about ourselves, right, then we're going to just try to get angry and project and put it on somebody else. And instead of saying, like whenever we have a situation where we have an argument or some unhappiness between two people, no matter what it looks like, it's never just one person in the two. It's always some message for both people, always.
Absolutely.
It's not, I don't know what's the matter with them. Like, why do they have this issue? And we spend all this time like, oh God, I can't stand being around them because they're doing this, or I can't stand this conversation with them. It's really getting to a place of, well, okay, that triggers me when I'm in the presence with this person and they're this way. So why am I triggered by that?
Right. Right.
And why do I create it? Why do I have that? What is reflecting back to me that I'm creating this, especially when it's repetitive, right? Sometimes we do it to test ourselves. Can I stay in this neutral, non-judgmental place with that being presented around me? Sometimes it's, yeah, there's still a speck you still haven't looked at there.
Well, and like we've talked other times about how you go from a circular pattern where you just keep repeating to the spiral where you allow the expansion, but you still pass by the same energies to see, is there something else for me to see from this perspective?
Yes.
And as you spiral past, it's easier to say, oh, so that trigger now changed from this to this. So let me look at that and allow the expansion. And then you spiral past it again to the point where you're so far removed from it in your spiral that you're unaffected.
Right.
And to me, I mean, that again, back to that's the ultimate freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And it answers, well, I've already looked at this. Well, you've never been where you are right now. So actually, this is a new presentation to you. Right. The energies are different. So what's here this time?
Right.
And no judgment that it's presenting itself again.
Right. Right.
It's like reading the same book twice. You read things the second time that you did miss the first time because you've never been where you are in that present moment.
Right. Right. So yeah. So I guess where are we going to be at for this clearing for today?
Maybe just initially acknowledging where we've held judgments that we're unaware of.
And just maybe clear those away to be able to see more clearly the bigger picture. Yeah, that feels good.
To allow that bigger picture.
Yeah, because, here's the thing. And no matter how long we do this, whether it's for weeks or decades or whatever, right? Lifetimes, we still get triggered. I still get triggered, and the key is to say every time I get triggered, so why am I triggered? Like, why am I? And it doesn't make it any easier to the ego. The ego is like sometimes having little temper tantrums, stomping and screaming inside and everything else. And it's like, okay, let me let you have your temper tantrum and I'll be present with you. This is I'm going to give you a guide. I'll give you a day, have your temper tantrum. And now let's look at it. What's next?
Right.
And that's what I always do for everything.
Yeah. What if our to-do list was what's triggering me now?
Yeah.
Because that's really where the focus is.
Right.
Is on the trigger.
Yeah. So having that ability to see, how did you word that? That was really nice. The judgments.
Awareness
of where we have our hidden judgments. Yes. And triggers, right? To be able to see them without the judgment and to see them in the bigger, to start to be able to see the bigger picture of how they serve us with, in a way that takes our power back, starts to take our power back. Because this is like a bigger than a bread box kind of thing. This is a constant because we are built on judgment in this set of dimensions.
Right. Right.
We propel ourselves through judgment. That's why there's a purpose to a judgment or a trigger.
Well, we use them as our definition of who we are.
And who we are not.
Exactly.
Yep. So let's just be able to see all that with clarity and love, self-love, and gratitude for creating that for ourselves, right? So that we can finally see it in a productive way, that we can change it if we so choose, or not, or just accept it for what it is.
Right. Yeah, maybe instead of productive, a non-judgmental way, because productive is a judgment.
Right. I mean, when I say productive, I mean to do it without judgment, like productive in terms of like, instead of getting stuck in the judgment, being able to utilize it, instead of getting lost in it, kind of thing. But I mean, getting lost in it does its job in some way too, but whatever. That's a circular thing. Okay. All of that tied up in a little bow. So everybody sit back, take a deep breath as we open our hearts and we step out of separation back into wholeness and oneness. And we hold ourselves in the vibration where that is our truth. That is from where we exist, create, and experience. All right. I found a lot of resistance in there.
Yeah.
A lot of resistance. There's a lot of chattering going on.
I had an interesting visual. I've saw myself as, like this. At first I thought it was like bowling ball size, and I was like birthing it or what. And I was like, no, I don't feel like putting that much effort into it. So it was like I unzipped my meat suit that we like to call it and just removed it. And it was this huge blob. And I was like, oh, okay, there's my judgment. I can set it aside. I can put it out over there. And it was like, great. I feel great. I feel, wonderful. And then I tried to move from that spot. And it was like, oh, you have to carry it now because you're actually still attached to it. It's just external now. And I was like, well, now this is even harder because before I could just move and pretend.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, so can I deflate it? Can I this? And it was like, no matter what I did, it was just there. And it was like, I'm still judging it in some way. So then the getting to the place of, because I looked at it and it was like, that's what kept me out of jail. That's what kept me being a good person. That's what kept, and it was all these rules that I kept seeing. And I was like, that's exhausting.
Right.
And to be able to operate outside of that. And I saw myself in that other place. And it was like, I tried to define it and it wasn't fearless because there was just no fear. So how can you be fearless when there is no fear? Right. So it was really quite a mind bender, so to speak.
It was mind bending. I mean, I can barely describe what I saw because it was like, first there was a lot of chatter, then all of the chatter turned into, you're saying like a bowling ball, but for all the chatter turned into, for me, all these little balls almost like hanging all over the place, right? To a place where you sort of become blind to what's beyond that, right? And then it was like, okay, well, I see that. And a lot of it was looking at it collectively too, because oh boy, there was a lot collectively with that. So, and it was like, okay, well, we can't see the forest for the trees because there's so much, right? So many of the things that you're talking about, right? And then finally, I was like, okay. So I sort of recognized seeing them and being present with them, right? And then I was like, okay, but how about we make you guys sort of like crystals then instead of like ball bearings, all of the chatter, right? And then what if we let the light with the being crystal, let the light shine through it, right? And create a different, and it almost became like they became chimes.
Oh,
like,
nice.
Yes. And so I was sort of moving through it and it was like just sort of pushing them aside because, and then they would make this beautiful noise, right? As well as have this beautiful light come through them. And I was like, okay, well, I see how to walk through it. Not sure I'm figuring out how to allow it to go away, but it seemed more functional at the end. So it was good.
An opportunity to revisit.
Yes, an opportunity to revisit. Absolutely. All right. Well, so everybody sit with this. This is another big one, which is, of course, I think why we're having 2-week spaces between these last couple of them, right? So, because we're having another 2 weeks since I will be traveling this time. And yeah, so take the time to look at these judgments. Take the time to see how you can shift your perception of them and shift your experience with them, right? Like that's what we're doing is shifting what we're taught you, both of us talking about from that session is shifting our experience with them. And like, instead of looking at it as, yeah, it's funny when you said that about unzipping it and putting it out, you got to think, it makes me think of being pregnant. Like how miserable.
Well, that's exactly what I felt.
Right. And how you get like miserable at the end of pregnancy and then the baby comes and you got to carry everything but the kitchen sink and you're like, God, it was so much easier with the baby inside.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
So So sit with that and allow these things to come out. Allow yourself to repackage it, repurpose it, to see how you can interact differently with it instead of just trying to banish it away.
Right.
See what it's there to show you, because when you maybe change your perception of how to see it, then it can help to show you maybe more clearly from a different perspective what it is you might be missing. That's why it keeps on repeating itself or keeping itself present in your reality. So baby steps, and this is a lot, because it's like, especially today when we're in the practice of consciousness, these are the deepest things that we feel victim to. So they're the things that the ego very, very masterfully has hidden and preserved and embraced, and use the victimhood feeling to. So those are the things we sometimes most deeply judge. So that's why we project it out to something else. Right.
Right.
So,
And
so
share
that's
with
our,
us. Share with
yes,
us what you come up with.
yes,
We'd love to hear.
please do. And I love looking at some comments when, on the after plays and stuff like that.
Right.
Absolutely share. Also share it with people that could use this, because we can all use this. Honestly, this is part of our collective effort of, let's all look at this, because the more we look at it individually, the better and easier it shifts collectively. So please share, please, follow, subscribe, promote to others, because that's what we're all here to do together. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Which would be the first week of October already. Crazy.
I know, that's hard to believe.
I know.
Wow. Yeah.
I know. And we will see you then, and we'll see you out there in the meantime. So have a great one. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni
signing off with this week's Living Ascension. Bye, everyone.